Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our reaction video regarding the MTA hearing with the City Council. And this is your host, Jason Anthony, reporting from his studios in Brooklyn. Well, today we had another, public hearing regarding the MTA. This time with the City Council. Let's see if we could find the hearing that was held today at City Hall, which had let's say, an unexpected guest. That we know this person very well. And that is Mr. X, aka William Stanford Jr. Let's see if we could find in here their hearings. Let's see if it's this one. Yes! Bingo. So let's take a listen. It is almost 4 hours long.
Morning, Speaker Johnson, my colleague, and everyone here, representative from the MTA. Welcome to today's hearing of the City Council Transportation Committee. I'm Danis Rodriguez, the chair of the committee. First, let me recognize Speaker Johnson, who immediately will
The
deliver his
Darling
opening
of
statement.
Chelsea.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here today. I want to thank you, Chair Rodriguez, and the Transportation Committee for holding this hearing. I see we've been joined by Councilmembers Cohen and Koo. We are here today to talk about the MTA's new capital plan and also the transformation plan, but that really undersells the importance of this hearing. This is about so much more. It's about the future of New York City, our economic vitality, our place as the greatest city in the world, and the subway system that makes all of that possible. And if it fails, so does New York. The bright side here is that the capital plan, I believe, is prioritizing the right things. Signal modernization is what will actually get us to fast, reliable service. It's an acknowledgement that Andy Byford's Fast Forward plan is the way to turn things around, and the MTA is finally investing more in making the system accessible to all New Yorkers. But this process isn't giving me much confidence that the MTA can pull this off. The capital budget process has never been transparent, but this plan is even more rushed and less detailed than usual. Something this important, something this expensive should not be handled this way. Riders deserve better. I believe the key to real change at the MTA is accountability through transparency, and I will keep saying that. There are still basic questions left to answer. Why are the costs still so high? Can we really expect to get billions from the federal government? How can we finish the most ambitious capital plan ever when we're still working on the last 3 capital plans? We are at a crossroads here. The decisions made in the next few months will have an impact for decades. But what is the city's role in all of this? After losing Veronica Vanderpool, the city may be down to 2 votes on a 17-member board. We have 90% of the ridership and already pay for the majority of the operating budget. We already contribute billions to the MTA's capital program. We will be outnumbered 3-1 on the Capital Program Review Board. We get 1 member on the 6-member Traffic Mobility Review Board, which will have tremendous power over congestion pricing, which, by the way, uses New York City streets to pay for almost 30% of the MTA's capital plan. And we're being asked once again to open up our wallet to give more than ever before. After absolutely no input, we're told to just hand over $3 billion. And for what in return? Hope and faith that things turned around? That the secret to better service is to take away capital projects from New York City Transit? Obviously, my preference is to take the whole system back. Have the city run the subways and buses again. Municipal control, as I've said, would solve so many of the issues I think we're talking about today. That isn't happening overnight, but there has to be a middle ground. Something between that and begging for a real seat at the table. Because the crisis at the MTA isn't just about executing the capital plan. It's about a transformation plan that somehow takes one of the most opaque government structures possible and makes it worse. We're staring down a massive operating deficit, as we'll discuss today. By 2023, debt service payments will be $3.5 billion a year from the MTA. That is 20% of the MTA's revenue. That is not sustainable. If it keeps going, the only people that will suffer will be the riders, not the politicians or bureaucrats that got us in this mess. If the MTA wants this plan to succeed, if they want it to be viewed as legitimate, they should be actively seeking more city input. What we're doing now isn't working. I hope this is the beginning of a more cooperative, productive era, but I need to see a real commitment from the MTA, a real show of good faith. If the MTA wants city dollars, we're going to need a lot more transparency in return. And before I hand it back to Chair Rodriguez, I want to say I have a relationship with at least 3 of the people that are sitting there, and I really respect Andy and Jano and Pat, and I think you all actually have been doing a great job in turning things around. But I think that this capital plan and the lack of transparency really goes against, I think, some of the good progress and work that you all have made. And I've really appreciated the partnership that we've had, the ability to have an open line of communication, to talk about projects and issues that are both district-specific to me, but also bigger system-wide issues that the MTA is facing. I was a supporter of the city chipping in the needed money for the MTA plan that the governor needed the additional money for, that Joe Lhota put into place a couple of years ago, and having the city contribute that money, the emergency plan. And I think that we need more transparency here. So we're going to get into that in the testimony today, the questions that I'll have both about the transformation plan, about the current capital plan, what the city can expect, what riders can expect, how we can get some of those answers from you all today, but also on an ongoing basis. Today, today, I really mean this, is not meant about me sitting up here and trying to score cheap shots on the MTA. It's really me wanting to dive in deep on some of the transparency issues and transformation plan issues that I think are really going to say a lot about what happens for the current capital plan, but the previous capital plans that we haven't finished out yet, and wanting to understand in finer detail how the transformation plan is going to affect all of this moving forward. And then I want to talk a little bit about the operating deficit the MTA is facing and looking at how you plan on balancing that, what that means to riders across the system, subway riders and bus riders. So that's what I want to get into today. I appreciate you all being here, and I turn it back over to Chair Rodriguez.
Thank you, Speaker. And, everyone knows how you have made transportation one of the top priority. And the transportation plan is not only, master plan is not only that bring DOT to the table to have a vision, a policy for the next few years. This is about how are we running buses, trains, making the street accessible to everyone. So we know, and I feel that the new leadership of the MTA also, they know where we are. You know that you're sitting in the hot chair. You know that you're ready to hear from the frustration of so many New Yorkers who inherit a crisis of the largest
Let's stop it here for 1 minute. There is the Transportation Committee Chair, Yaris Rodriguez. Next to him, to his left, is the darling of Chelsea. And guess who it is? Corey Johnson. And then from the MTA, we have Patrick Joseph Foy. We have Bob Ferran. We have President Andy Byford. And Jan Lieber, that is from Capital Construction. So this hearing is about 4 hours long. We're going to try our best to get it all, or at least the majority of it. And if you want to chime in, you're free to do so. So the time is 20 minutes towards midnight. Let's continue, shall we?
transportation system in the whole nation and one of the largest one in the whole world. So we appreciate that, those of you that have been around the MTA for years and years now are also taking the baton on listening and putting your ideas, suggestions to fix our transportation system today. As I said before, like I've been chairing this committee for the last couple of years. This is one of the great opportunities that we have to address something that is an equalizer for the whole city. Transportation is important for upper, middle, working class. Throughout the 5 boroughs, we are seeing the need to repairs in elevators, escalators, infrastructures, and the aging signaling system. We have also seen the need of affordability with the fares. We need to ensure that our subway system not only continue running consistently and reliability, but also that it is affordable to all people in New York City. And that's why we established, with the leadership, with the speaker, advocate, our committee, we created a fair fare to help those New Yorkers who live on poverty lines. A large percentage of the people that use New York City's transportation system are working class, many of them immigrants, many of them living in underserved communities in what we call transportation deserts. These communities are located in transit desert places like in the South Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island, lack of the proper subway accessibility and subway maintenance. This is one of the
Whoa,
largest.
whoa, 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 whoa. Wait a minute. Did Jandis Rodriguez said South Bronx? What part of South Bronx? Because you have the 6 and you have the 2 and the 5. Plus you have the 4 train. If he means like, let's say, Soundview, that's a transit desert. If he is mentioning the walkways, um, Southeast Queens, like Southeast Jamaica, Locust Manor, Hollis, Queens Village, Rosedale, Canarsie, Middle Village, Bayside, etc. Those are transit deserts because you only have one form of transportation, and of course, Staten Island, the West Shore. Like for instance, the Amazon warehouse, the North Shore, the South Shore of Staten Island, the east, the eastern part of Staten Island. Those are transit deserts. We could say Riverdale in the Northwest Bronx is a transit desert. Um, Eastchester, and of course, Pan Bay. So let's continue.
Largest plans in the history of the MTA. And that's why this plan has to come with a responsibility. We must prioritize stations like those at 149th Street and 3rd Avenue, as well as 170 Giron Avenue, subway station, and many stations in Brooklyn which are in need of repairs that have been left to the last for decades. We must also ensure that as the MTA conducts its repairs, we do not see any reduction in services of employee layoff. And I stand with the TW call to be sure that priority should be given to riders and workers. In 2010, we saw the layoff of 1,000 workers occur within the MTA. We cannot have a single layoff of cattle services in our city. At this hearing, we are overseeing the MTA's transformation in the 2020-2024 capital plan will be in effect in, I believe, like in 40 days. The transformation plan was proposed as a cost-cutting measure to consolidate overlapping aspects of the various subsidiaries within the MTA. Contribution on New York City, large contribution even though we don't have the fair share seat at the board, congestion price, and even a Twitter by that guy in DC who said that he will put the money to expand the subway to the Second Avenue to 125th is included in the calculation of this budget. Something that we need to assure that these numbers are real. And I will even call that we should use our private-public partnership in DC to push DC to even expand that contribution to expand the Second Avenue subway to the South Bronx. One of the proposals the MTA is considering is consolidating the capital planning functions of each of the MTA subsidiaries, including moving New York City Transit Authority's capital planning to MTA capital, which is discouraging given the work that the new person that we've been looking to attract with international experience, someone that is not shy on listening to the frustration, someone that has developed a level of trust by many of us in the public and private sector, he will see his role being reduced, and we cannot allow that to happen. President Andy Biden has put into improving services and developing the modernization plan known as a fast forward, the best one that we have ever had in our city, and we support it. All the more concerning is the fact that the reorganization goes with the release of the MTA's largest capital plan ever, which is estimated to cost $54.8 billion. 73% or $39.9 billion of that amount is allocated for New York City Transit Authority projects, including those proposed in Fast Forward, such as $7.1 billion for signals, so that we can leave behind that plan, that the old plan schedule that we have is supposed to have all the signal system being upgraded by 2044, which I will be like 80 years old if we will follow that old plan. Now we have a real plan, and it's something that the money is there to accomplish. $5.2 billion for new elevator and ramp to make stations accessible, and $2.3 billion to replace 2220 buses, which accounts for 39% of the entire fleet. We cannot see any reduction of the buses from Riverdale to any places in Brooklyn or through the 5 boroughs. I applaud this plan and the steps the MTA is taking to modernize the subway and the buses, as well as create a more accessible system. But I'm concerned that the MTA restructuring could impact the capital process. We would like more details on the restructuring process, such as how it could impact project timelines. Similarly, I have concern about how subway services will be impacted by the extensive resignaling that is anticipated in this capital plan. We must ensure that we do not see cut to services. All the while, the MTA is considering cutting as many as 2,700 positions. We need answers on how the MTA will balance these interests and how they come out to that conclusion. The capital plan is a step in the right direction, but it will take work to fund and implement it. We need to make sure that we prioritize underserved immigrants and working class community. When we bring the new technology to pay through the apps, through the fund, none of them pilot projects included the working class and the immigrants community. And it says a lot about the culture that we have in New York City, where the immigrant and the working class neighborhood are always the last. And we
Okay, that statement by Yanis Rodriguez clearly states that. Oh, thank you for joining me, Andy. By the way, that statement that Yanis Rodriguez just mentioned about the immigrants is fairly true
need to continue
because
working with the MTA and
with the
advocates to make that
introduction
transition
of
affordable to
Amelie,
all working class
they only
Americans, as well as
considered
those
between
living
Grand
abroad.
Central and
I
Antibar
would like to
Place and
welcome
Staten
the
Island.
representative of the MTA for being with us
But
today.
let's keep listening to his opening statements.
To administer the affirmation and invite you to deliver your opening statement.
Please raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony?
Whoa, 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 whoa! Epic fail! Bob Ferran was the last one to raise his right hand. So we have Bob Ferran, Patrick Joseph Foy, Channel Lieber, and Super A! Let us hear their testimony.
Can you repeat it? Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting.
So, folks, hold on one second, guys. From TWU, guys, folks. So.
There you have the comrades from TW Local 100 saying no contract, no peace.
Pat, before you begin, I actually was going to, but I forgot. I want to just actually thank the men and women from TWU, which I know you are in your remarks, for the work that they do every single day. They really keep the subways and buses moving, and we really appreciate their hard work. I know you're in the middle of a contract negotiation, and maybe you'll talk about that today, but I want to turn it back over to you.
Speaker, I second that motion, and I also abhor the recent increase on attacks on transit workers, both physical assaults and sexual assaults. I'll note that state law provides that attacking a transit worker is a Class D felony with serious penalties, and I'd urge prosecutors and law enforcement to look to that option more frequently going forward. Good morning, and thank you for inviting us here today. Particular thanks to Speaker Johnson and Chair Rodriguez. I'm Pat Foy, Chairman and CEO of the MTA. I'm joined by my colleagues, New York City Transit President Andy Byford, MTA Chief Financial Officer Bob Foran, and Jano Lieber, who leads construction and development. Speaker and Chairman, I want to thank you for your focus on subways, buses, and paratransit. I thank you both particularly for your leadership on Subway Action Plan funding, and Fair Fare is an important program with much to be done. We at the MTA would welcome an even more engaged mayor on transit issues and an even more engaged city council, and obviously you both have increased substantially the focus and engagement of the city council on transit issues. The 2020 to 24 capital plan our board approved in September is exactly what elected officials, city council members, I believe, advocates, and most importantly, customers have long demanded. We're in the midst of an exciting and challenging
Yes,
time.
Andy.
We remain laser focused on delivering safe and reliable service for the 7.6 million customers who use the subways and buses every day. As we embark on a historic capital plan and transformation, our core mission remains the same: to keep this city and region growing. All our agency presidents, Andy Byford, Greg Cipriano, Phil Eng, Kathy Rinaldi, and Danny DiCrescenzo, are working hard to improve the experience for our customers day to day. But we also have our eyes on the future. New Yorkers deserve a modern 21st century transportation network, and that's what we plan to deliver with our ambitious and historic proposed 2020 to 24
And we just posted on the description
calls for
below the
unprecedented
link
levels of investment across the
directly
system,
to the
amounting to
video that you can watch
$51.5
it in
billion
all
over the next
leisure.
5 years, with an additional $3.3 billion for MTA bridges and tunnels. This proposed capital program is the key to growing and maintaining the capacity of our system, which is a driving force of the state economy. The plan is forecasted to generate 350,000 jobs statewide, 75% of which would be in the city of New York. And we expect that fully 89% of the capital plan investment will be spent within the state of New York. It's important to note service is improving across the system. I want to highlight how we got to where we are today. After a state of emergency for the transit system was declared in the summer of 2017, the state and the city, with Speaker and Chair, your leadership, equally contributed over $800 million for the Subway Action Plan. This infusion of funds allowed us to dramatically expedite essential maintenance work, helping to right the wrongs of decades of underinvestment and neglect. It was a critical step to getting our core infrastructure back on track, so we could begin providing improved levels of service. This incredible effort has led to steady, sustained gains in on-time performance across the system. In October, weekday on-time performance reached 81.5%. That's an improvement of nearly 16% from the year before. October was also the 5th straight month with subway on-time performance above 80%. For these improvements, I want to thank Andy Byford, Sally Labrera, and the entire Subways team, including our colleagues at the Transit Workers, especially our partners in labor. These hardworking men and women are on the front lines every day delivering operational excellence. The improvement in performance hasn't been lost on our customers. We're seeing increases in ridership across all agencies. In September, the average weekday ridership on the subway climbed to 5.77 million people. Compare that to 2018, where that number was around 5.3 million. To put that in perspective, the subway system is carrying nearly 250,000 more trips each weekday than it was a year earlier. And buses are carrying nearly 34,000 more trips per weekday. The increase shows we're steadily rebuilding the public's trust. We're also focused on improving the bus and paratransit network. The focus on operations isn't limited to just daily service or to the subways. We're also thinking big and ambitious on buses and paratransit. We know that buses are a lifeline for our customers outside Manhattan, serving more than 1.8 million customers a day. Craig Cipriani and the New York City Transit MTA bus teams are pushing ahead with borough-by-borough bus network redesigns. We're taking a completely fresh and holistic look at service in each borough, including focusing on outer borough needs and transit desert needs. Many bus routes across the city haven't been changed in decades, putting them behind the times when it comes to new developments in housing or job centers. The redesigns are using qualitative and quantitative data to update these routes to better fit our customers' needs. We're also working closely with our partners at the New York City Department of Transportation, and as always, community input is important. We've recently released a final proposal for the Bronx bus redesign, which includes the creation of 3 new routes. Frequency also will significantly increase on 9 major corridors, which will be served by 10 routes. Thanks to Councilmember Cohn for being a great collaborator during this process. Redesign work on the buses network is also well underway in Queens, and we just kicked off the redesign process in Brooklyn. On Staten Island, express bus riders are already seeing 12% faster travel times after that redesign was completed last fall. The establishment of the 14th Street busway, together with the use of automated bus lane enforcement, has all recognized been a great success. It's a prime example of coordination between the MTA and our partners at New York City Department of Transportation, particularly Commissioner Polly Trottenberg. Thanks also to Speaker Johnson and Chair Rodriguez for your support on the busway. There's been a dramatic increase in bus speeds on the M14. It once took an average of 15 minutes to travel between 8th and 3rd Avenues. It now just takes over 10. That's an improvement of nearly 33%. Customers are noticing too, since the busway was launched in October, ridership is up 17% compared to the same time last year. Before the busway opened, there was concern that traffic on the surrounding streets would become unbearable. But according to a study that was requested by New York City DOT, there's been no significant impact on congestions on surrounding streets. We're also investing in and focused on the Access-a-Ride service. We're expanding the popular eHail pilot program, which offers on-demand service for paratransit users, doubling access to the program from 1,200 to 2,400 Access-a-Ride customers. For the core ADA-required service we provide, we're also making improvements, expanding the types of trips offered, leveraging more taxis and for-hire vehicles, and adding 700 new vehicles to our aging fleet. Thanks to improved GPS tracking, customers can now track their trips on an app and webpage. And in an effort to make the system more transparent, we regularly publish performance metrics on a public dashboard. The MTA is hopeful that fair fares will prove to be another fruitful partnership, and we thank you, Speaker Johnson, for your leadership on this issue. We strongly support this critical program, which is run by the city to give low-income New Yorkers access to the transit system. We support, too, a faster rollout of fair fares so this program can benefit more people. We're ready to do our part to make that happen. Let's talk for a couple of minutes about the proposed 2020 to 24 capital plan. We aren't just thinking about operating improvements, and the work certainly doesn't stop there. The historic $51.5 billion proposed capital program. In this plan, we've laid out a bold vision for capital investment that will deliver the world-class transit network our riders deserve. The system has been neglected and underinvested in for too long. Just as we've seen a 50% increase in ridership system-wide in the last 20 years, We've also seen an 8% decline in the annualized rate of capital investment. Our teams deserve immense credit for getting the system to a more reliable place, but now is the time to take decisive action to ensure the future health of our transit system in New York City. The proposed capital plan is fully a 70% increase over the current 2015 to 19. We worked with legislators, advocates, the public, and our customers to get their perspectives on what the system needs. New York City subways and buses will receive $40 billion investment. I note that that's more than the entire current capital plan. It encompasses all of Fast Forward's priority projects and more. Our goal for these next 5 years is to build upon the success we're already delivering. For example, on the 7 and L lines, signal modernization investments have led to significant improvements in performance. Modernizing the signal system allowed us to increase the number of trains per hour on the 7 line to 29 during the morning and evening rushes, up from 25 to 27, while on-time performance on the 7 skyrocketed from 75% to over 90. That is why the new capital plan includes $5.3 billion for subway signal modernization on 6 more line segments: the Lexington Avenue line, Fulton, Crosstown, 63rd Street, Astoria, and Queens Boulevard lines. 33 interlockings will be modernized or modified, and we're upgrading all our communications networks. The plan also calls for the purchase of 1,900 new subway cars. Together with signaling updates, this will deliver faster, more reliable, and more frequent service. Accessibility is another cornerstone of this capital program. We plan to invest in 70 more accessible stations. That more than fulfills our commitment to ensure that no rider will be more than 2 stations away from an accessible station. We're targeting these upgrades at stations that serve more than 60% of our ridership. Replacing 60 miles of track will also help us deliver better service. This program proposes to install 20 miles of continuous welded rail, or CWR, across the network. Compared to jointed rail, CWR is more durable, with less than half the rate of rail breaks, and provides a quieter, smoother ride. Additionally, 175 stations would be renewed to address components in need of critical repair, including the replacement of up to 65 escalators and up to 75 elevators that have reached the ends of their useful lives. The capital plan also provides full funding for Phase 2 of the 2nd Avenue subway, allowing us to expand the network into a transit desert. This will add 3 new fully accessible stations and a connection with Metro North, finally delivering on the decades-old promise to give residents of Harlem better access to our system. Beyond the subways, the capital plan also advances our commitment to a cleaner, greener bus fleet, which will help to create a more clean and green New York. We're buying 2,400 new buses, 500 of which will be all electric. Our goal is to transition to a zero-emission fleet throughout the network by 2040. After 2029, all bus purchases will be electric buses. A younger fleet of buses can run farther before breaking down, which means more reliability and better service for our customers. Funding for this program relies on a range of sources. Central Business District tolling is a critical element and expected to provide $15 billion of capital. New revenue streams like the progressive mansion tax and the elimination of the internet tax advantage will add another $10 billion. We are anticipating $10 billion in federal funding, and the MTA is also contributing with another $9.8 billion in MTA funds. But it's critical to note that this will be not enough to completely fund our bold vision. To fully execute the capital program, we require additional investment, including $3 billion from the state and $3 billion from the city of New York. The city's contribution would be used to fund accessibility upgrades on the subways. That money would be timed following the expenditure of the $25 billion expected from Central Business District tolling and other new tax revenues. Without the $6 billion commitment from the city and the state, ADA work would be delayed. We need to schedule the MTA's contribution last in order to responsibly manage our debt service. And it's important to note that capital funds are completely separate from our operating budget. The unfortunate reality is that the MTA has had to reconcile our service improvements and customer improvements with the fact that our cost structure is not where it needs to be. Even as we pursue aggressive cost-cutting measures to find nearly $3 billion in annual recurring savings, we're looking at major out-year deficits. It's unfortunately the case that our operating budget is literally strained to the bone. But let me talk briefly about transformation. The MTA is instituting meaningful change and reform to completely transform the way we do business, as was required by amendments to state law in the last session. As part of the legislation that enables central business district tolling, the MTA was required to develop a reorganization plan that will result in a more efficient and effective organization. The MTA transformation plan was developed and approved by our board earlier this year, outlining what the future of the MTA could and should look like. That vision would see the MTA become a single unified capital group with consolidated back office functions across all agencies. This way, the operating agencies can focus on core delivery, service delivery, and safety. We're pleased to announce the selection of Anthony McCord as the MTA's new Chief Transformation Officer to lead this historic effort. Anthony will work closely with senior leaders across the organization to modernize the MTA and deliver on the hard work of transformation itself, implementing the necessary changes to consolidate and streamline the agency and ensure the new MTA is set up sustainably for long-term success. Anthony is a senior executive with over 25 years of experience in industrial service and infrastructure roles around the world, focusing on transformation and change management. He's a proven strategic leader with an impressive track record for team building and effecting meaningful change that will drive direct customer benefits. We're eager to have him join the MTA later this year. I'm also happy to share that we selected a future Chief Operating Officer, Mario Peliquin, last week. Mario is a senior executive with over 30 years of experience in the transit and rail industry, and his distinguished career is rooted with direct field experience in both safety and operations, including as a rail traffic controller and safety investigator in Canada. As COO, Mario will lead our team of exceptional agency presidents so that we continue to deliver gains in performance and maintain a laser-sharp focus on safety, reliability, and customer experience. A critical element of transformation and a key part of how we will deliver on this historic proposed capital program is through our new construction and development organization led by Jan Oliver. This group will be the single central point for capital project planning, development, and delivery. We're not waiting for the next capital program to start. Some of these reforms are already well underway. Great example is the L-Train project, moving ahead of schedule thanks to innovative recommendations from world-class academic partners and under the leadership of Jano and his team. Ultimately, transformation will help the agency to refocus on our core mission, dramatically improving service and giving customers the safe, modern, and reliable system they deserve. It will position us to most effectively and efficiently deliver on the proposed capital program, to put in much needed reinvestment in our infrastructure that truly powers this region and keeps it moving. Again, thank you for your support. Thank you for the invitation to be here, and we're happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you for that testimony. I look forward to diving in. Before we get into the details that I mentioned before, there's a big picture problem that I want to address with you. I really do appreciate the MTA being here today, but honestly, we don't see you enough. I think that's part of the problem. In 2018, the MTA came to 3 hearings. In 2017, 4 hearings. This is the 3rd time this year. We could be here all day and I wouldn't get through every question that I have or that the members of the council have. And I know you won't be able to answer many of the questions that we actually have today. We barely have any details about this capital plan, nothing on addressing the backlog for the other 3 capital plans the MTA hasn't finished. No construction schedules for individual projects, no cost targets, nothing on how the phasing will work on the different capital plans and the projects. And if you're asking us to consider spending $3 billion in city dollars on top of the fare box, the real estate transfer taxes, the sales tax, the internet sales tax, the mortgage recording tax, the payroll tax, the taxi and for-hire vehicle charges, and the commandeering of our roads, we need a commitment to have a real public dialogue. The council negotiates and approves the city's annual budget. We can't make decisions on a $3 billion magnitude based off of a few estimates and a PowerPoint presentation. I would love the MTA to commit to testifying at least 5 times a year.
The MTA testifying 5 times a year? Let's hear what Andy's Randomness has to say.
This is why I love slowing down YouTube videos.
Really? That means every 3 months? The darling of Chelsea wants. So let's continue on. This is getting very heated.
With senior staff, people that can actually answer our questions, so that we're not hearing, we will get back to you, we will get back to you, we will get back to you, which is what we hear at all the hearings that we have, because the appropriate people are not here to answer our questions in real time. Are you willing to make a commitment to have the MTA come and testify at the city council more regularly with senior staff that will report back to us on the questions that are important when we are negotiating a city budget, determining whether or not we should put billions of dollars into the MTA's capital plan?
So, Speaker, you've got the senior leadership of the MTA here today. The last time I attended a hearing in this chamber, we had the senior leadership of the MTA there. You've got our commitment that unless, for instance, particular levels of expertise are required from other people in the organization, obviously we're making a request for $3 million from the state and the city. It's appropriate that the council hold hearings, and we're prepared to return and to answer the questions that are raised. We did a hearing in Broadway up the street with the Senate and the Assembly a couple of weeks ago, and we're committed to returning to the council.
Thank you. When can we expect the information that I just mentioned on the capital plan, the information related to the 3 capital plans the MTA hasn't finished, construction schedules for individual projects, cost targets, and how the phasing will work?
Good morning. I completely endorse your.
What's going on?
A couple days ago, I instigated a meeting with all of the advocates because I saw they were coming together on their own, and I wanted an opportunity to talk to them about just those questions and to be transparent about where we are and how we are planning the next capital program. In the past, Speaker, Chair, what happened was the MTA approved the capital program included a list of projects with schedules attached to them. Frequently, the capital program, as the current capital program, was actually enacted late. And at that point, design would begin on projects. And by the time the design ended, because we were doing 100% design the traditional way, then the projects couldn't get done in short order. What we would like to do is to come up with a plan which doesn't just give you a list of projects and a spend down that isn't realistic, but one that actually is directly reflecting the bundling strategy that we're going to pursue. And what I mean by that is because of the importance of the projects on the right-of-way and the importance of the ADA projects, we may have to do some shutdowns, some outages. And we must make sure that every time we do an outage in the transit system, because we have been improving performance so much under Andy Byford's leadership, that we get every piece of work done that can be done during that outage. So I am specifically going through, to your question, Speaker, about the existing capital program and what hasn't been finished. We are already looking for opportunities to take ongoing projects, for example, the Culver line, which is being re-signaled, and the AC line, which is getting re-signaled, and adding work, some of which has not begun, to those projects so they can be bundled and it can all get done in a much more efficient way. Once we complete, Speaker, the bundling analysis, and we're right now doing that to make sure that we will hit the ground running and do at least 20 ADA stations soon after the Capital Program Review Board takes action. we will provide a detailed analysis of exactly which projects are going to be bundled and the sequence with them. But that work is ongoing. I've been open with the advocates about it, and I'm completely willing to commit to transparency in how do we finalize that bundling process, and most important from your standpoint, how do we track it going forward? Because we do want this to be a more transparent MTA in the new MTA era.
So when can we expect some of those details on the bundling, on individual projects? When can we expect the details on the issues that I mentioned? Individual projects, cost targets, phasing of work. It may not have to be all at once. It could be in a piecemeal way.
And what I said is we'll provide that on the projects that we're going to put out soon after the capital program is approved. So I would say that's somewhere between 15 and 25 ADA stations, and Andy and I are working on the bundling strategy for signaling right now. So I think we'll be able to give you a preliminary outline of that within 60 days after the approval of the capital program review board, and a fuller outline of how the entire bundling and scheduling strategy is going to work within 6 months after final approval of the capital program.
And what about previous capital programs where projects are behind schedule?
Yeah, at the risk of incurring your wrath, and I want to get back to you about that, I think that we're in the middle of going through literally every project to see how they can be bundled into the existing program and the future going work. So I'd say if you give me 60 days, I will be able to tell you exactly when the work under the existing program will be bundled and will be completed.
Thank you. So I want to get into the transformation plan. I think the success of everything the MTA wants to do is at stake if you get the potential reorganization of the MTA wrong. And I don't think it was a great start. The Alex Partners plan was done without any real input from the public or from stakeholders.
Indeed! Bravo! Bravo!
Really care about.
The darling from Chelsea is hitting the MTA on their faces. The Alex Partners plan didn't have public input. The same company that deal with the Puerto Rico Power Authority reconstruction under Lisa Donohue's leadership, and now we have Anthony McCord. His nomination was approved behind closed doors and under my radar. Let's keep listening
About how this plan is going to work. And one of the main reasons I've been calling for municipal control of the city's subways and buses is because I think riders deserve to know who to hold accountable when things are not going well, or when things are going well, who should get that praise. That, we don't want to point our finger at 10 different people not knowing who actually takes responsibility on this. I have been following the process, and honestly, I can barely make heads or tails of it, so I want to try to get something straight here today. The plan called for agencies like New York City Transit to lose responsibility for capital work. That work would move over to one office at MTA headquarters. For the subway, that meant one division would run signal installation, and another division would be in charge of adjusting service to allow the work to happen. But then last month, the MTA said that New York City Transit would be leading, quote, resignaling work. What does that mean? Who am I supposed to call when something goes wrong? Pat, who do you call when something goes wrong on something in this arena? Does Andy get the signaling work? And if he does that mean the whole plan is changing? Is there anything else that we should rethink as we are parsing these things out? That's what I want to understand here today as it relates to the transformation plan.
So, Speaker, to answer your first question, to paraphrase the 20th century president, the MetroCard stops with me. And you've got the senior leadership of the MTA before you. This is the group that is responsible. Andy for subways and buses, Jano for capital construction, Bob falling to my left to the finances of the MTA. If there are questions or criticisms or observations or in a rare case compliments, this is the group. The signaling is going to be led by New York City Transit. The construction will be done by Janos Group in cooperation with Andy Byford and his team and Pete Tomlin, the internationally recognized signaling expert that Andy recruited away from Toronto. And that partnership, I believe, will get those 6 lines done. And New York City Transit, working closely with construction and development, will figure out a way to spend funds as efficiently as possible. But also, as Jano mentioned when he talked about bundling, to amortize, I'll use the term, customer inconvenience over as much work in as short a time as possible. So it's not only a question of being efficient with capital, that's obviously a primary responsibility, but also to minimize customer inconvenience and to get as much work done for every outage.
So the person that was supposed to lead this reorganization, the new Chief Transformation Officer, Anthony McCord, who you mentioned, Pat, has quite a lot of experience in eliminating jobs. Some have been calling him publicly a hatchet man. I don't know if that's fair.
Hatchet man! Bravo!
I understand that the MTA may need to eliminate redundancies, but is this how we want to get started? The top priority should be about rebuilding trust, and it's hard to do that if people are afraid of potential layoffs by bringing this person in. Does he have any experience in reorganizing transit agencies?
He has experience in infrastructure, transportation. He is a superb, seasoned corporate executive. I mentioned in my remarks, Speaker, that while we are talking about a $51.5 billion capital plan, there was extreme stress on our operating budget. Alex Partners did recommend this past summer a number of reforms, which we're in the process of implementing. One of those was a reduction of up to 2,700 positions. Many of those will be accomplished by vacancies and attrition. We have the transformation is expected and must result in cost savings over the next 4 to 5 years of $1.6 billion. And reduction in headcount will regrettably be a part of that going forward.
So the new Chief Transformation Officer will report to the MTA board, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
While the new Chief Engineering and Accessibility Officers will report to the MTA Chairman and CEO, you. Why does the Chief Transformation Officer report to the MTA board rather than you?
Well, I'm the Chairman of the board. That provision was set in state law.
Why? Do you understand? What was the reason?
I think it was a sign of the state legislature's belief in the importance of the Chief Transformation Officer reporting to the board. I think that's an appropriate. I'm the Chairman of the board and the CEO, and I thought it was an appropriate reporting relationship.
Will multiple lines of reporting, do you think, create any level of disorganization?
No, I don't see that, and I think if there are issues that arise, they'll be dealt with in the ordinary course of business.
Other large transit agencies, such as Transport for London, I just got back from London and I met with them, have recently undergone successful reorganizations that could have served as a template for the MTA. But Alex Partners' plan did not refer to the management practices of other similar agencies around the United States or around the world. In formulating the transformation plan, were lessons drawn from the restructurings undergone by peer agencies?
I can tell you, Speaker, that Alex Partners looked at other similar entities in the United States and abroad in doing the plan.
I actually think there are some great things in the transformation plan that was put forward, and I'm thrilled that fast forward is happening in the capital plan. But do you think that it's possible that we can really do all of this at once? If it starts to go wrong, it could undermine confidence in finishing projects that are actually essential for the growth of the MTA. Are you worried about this? How is the MTA going to finish 4 capital plans by 2024 and reorganize a sprawling bureaucracy and deal with the confusion and growing pains that are inevitable when any large bureaucracy starts to make changes? Do you have any of those concerns?
So let me start and then I'll turn it over to Jano. I'll note a couple of things. One is new team at the MTA, including new team on construction and development, led by Jano, who was obviously a pivotal player in the redevelopment of the World Trade Center. probably one of the most challenging, and I have some insight into this given the fact I spent some time at the Port Authority, but probably one of the most challenging and important public-private projects in the history of the nation, with lots of financial, real estate, physical, political, and community issues. So point one. Point two, the state legislature, among the reforms that were adopted this year was a passage and the requirement that MTA projects above $25 million be done on design build. I believe that will lead to a significant improvement in efficiency. Do you want to talk about it?
Sure. And Pat, in characteristic understatement, omitted to mention that his role at the World Trade Center was to negotiate against me, so that's how we got to know each other. Speaker, there really is a way to deliver this entire program and the work that remains to be done much more efficiently. And it starts with that concept of bundling I referred to earlier, reducing the number of projects. For better or worse, historically at the MTA, you sometimes have a separate capital project for a different wire on the same, two different wires on the same subway tunnel wall. That makes no sense. We have to look at these as major undertakings and piggyback all the work that can be done in a single outage. And by doing that, Speaker, we will reduce the number of projects in the capital program from somewhere between 1,400, or in a capital program of this size, maybe 2,000 projects, down to somewhere between 200 and 500 separate projects. So that's number one. Design build. The design build is not only going to allow us to do less time designing a project and get it into the construction phase much faster, but it's going to produce contractor innovation, like the contractor innovation that has allowed us to do the third track project on Long Island so much faster with less customer and public impact than anybody thought about. Fewer delays, fewer change orders, eliminating all the red tape, which the MTA has burdened itself with, and to some extent the MTA has been burdened with over time, that creates delay after delay on projects. And I have done that on projects. On the third track project on Long Island, it's a $2.5 billion project. We have 25 change orders, and it is a net credit to the MTA. So we're getting money back. Instead of on the Second Avenue subway phase one, 2,400 change orders. You see a change of direction on that. So I'm not going to belabor, there are many other issues that I think we're going to take on that are going to change the direction and make it much more certain that we can deliver more work in a short time. We're going to empower the people who are running projects to make decisions in ways that were never before. We're going to eliminate scope creep and design changes, which have bedeviled major MTA projects, and again, cause cost rises and delays that are part of the source of the problem. And we're going to motivate contractors in a way that's never happened before. I've already cut the payment time for contractors to 15 days for 30 days on all the projects I run. So contractors are giving us better prices and more responsiveness. So you can see we have a very, I hope you'll get a sense we have a very comprehensive strategy for reducing the number of projects so we can get more work done.
Thank you. I know the focus of this hearing is about the capital plan reorganization, but we need to talk about whether or not we can actually afford to run the system, especially when we're planning on bringing so many new projects online, as you just mentioned, Jano, at once. In 1994, the operating deficit for the MTA was about $11 million. Now it's over $500 million. I hope that the reorganization keeps us from hitting the $1 billion deficit you were projecting for 2023, but I'm not holding my breath. I don't think the advocates are either. And when the MTA has trouble with an operating budget, it is always the riders that bail you out with a fare hike. I don't want to see that happen given the looming deficit on the horizon. One reason that I'm so concerned is that we are adding almost $250 million to the operating budget for 500 new police officers. You are in pretty dire financial straits. Every single decision that impacts the operating budget should be heavily scrutinized so that we are sure that every dollar is doing the most for riders. So how did you get to that number? How did the MTA get to that number? Why 500 officers? Can you share the data and the analysis that the MTA did to determine that that was the right number and that we actually needed those officers on top of the NYPD officers that are already doing that work in the subways every single day?
So, Speaker, I'm going to ask our CFO to speak to the operating deficit question, and then I'll come back to the police question.
Okay. Thank you. I think it's important to point out that it is not always the answer to go back to the customers and ask for fare and toll increases. We have every 2 years gone forward and projected 4% fare and toll increases. That is less than the rate of inflation. But what has really helped us to be able to address our operating deficits is the fact that we have been reducing costs significantly. We have, by the time we finish the 2023 year, we will have reduced our annual recurring expenditures by more than $3 billion. So since 2010, we will have cut out $3 billion of operating expenses, recurring expenses out of our budget. That's significantly more than we raised in terms of fare and toll increases. And that's the commitment that we'll continue to make. We're going to look to see where we can be more efficient. The transformation is really important in this regard, because what we're doing is we're taking redundant or duplicative services that have been provided through the years at each of the agencies, and we're combining them so that we don't need 5 different HR departments. We don't need 5 different legal departments. We don't need 5 different accounting departments. We'll be able to combine those into one consolidated group that will serve each of the operating agencies so that the operating presidents can then focus on delivering safe, reliable service to our customers.
But Mr. Friend, aren't you concerned that the number is projected to be over $500 million in an operating deficit? As a chief financial officer, outside agencies that do these type of audits and that look at the financial health of a public authority, they are concerned about the size and scope of this. Are you concerned about what it looks like the operating deficit is going to be for the MTA?
Every 4-year financial plan that we put together since I arrived at the MTA 10 years ago, we've had out-year deficits, sizable out-year deficits, and we work slowly, methodically to reduce costs to address those deficits. So yes, I do think that our financial position is dire, but we are committed to trying to reduce costs in a safe way and so that we can still continue to provide reliable service.
I'm not laughing just because I actually appreciate everything that you said, but you just, I don't want to paper over it. You just said that the MTA's financial position is dire.
Yes, absolutely.
That's frightening.
Well, I tell you, we are in an unusual situation.
What does that mean in an unusual situation?
Our projected deficit in the July plan, before we had the transformation, was $1 billion. So we have to affect the transformation and the reform effort that the legislature challenged us to do and wrote into the legislation. I think it's interesting that we did not receive any operating aid when the budgets were passed in Albany.
Well, you should have.
Well, I'm just saying, what they did ask us, they gave us capital dollars, because and that's what's leading to this, tremendous historic capital program. But I think they wanted us to prove that we could reduce our costs in a responsible way through this transformation so that we would not have to turn immediately for additional operating aid. Now, I believe at some point in time, operating aid is going to be needed, but we need to prove that we can cut our costs and reduce any duplication so that we can be efficient in delivering the service that the customers need.
It's interesting. Pat, before you go to the police question, Nicole Gelinas had a piece in the Post a couple of weeks ago, and she was referring to the $17.5 billion budget. The MTA faces an $800 million deficit, 5% of spending rising to $2 billion, or more than 10% of spending by 2023. That's without a recession, she says. To fill the gaps, the MTA will take about $150 million built up from previous years, but mostly it proposes a slew of nearly $700 million in, quote, adjustments. Some are fine, such as eliminating vacant back office positions, saving $80 million a year. But another, she says, is just a naked cash grab, not savings. The MTA wants to save about $100 million a year by asking New York City taxpayers to pay more for Accessoride, the inefficient service, the disabled, which is used by the disabled, which runs a $500 million deficit. The MTA has no legal basis, she says, to ask the city for more. Providing public transit to everyone is part of the MTA's core mission. This is no different than when the MTA helped fix its budget crisis last year by forcing the city to fork over $400 million for the Subway Action Plan, which the MTA was doing track and signal repairs. It should have been doing all along. And then she goes on and she says that New Yorkers, New York City residents, already pay the bulk, 3/4 of the $7.5 billion the MTA collects in dedicated taxes and subsidies, like the payroll tax and the real estate transaction taxes. Now we are at a risk for annual random cash grabs by the MTA. And then she goes on and talks about the 500 cops, which will be $60 million a year, and that doesn't include overtime or pension costs related to it. So I'm pointing all of that out because it is concerning that this is the financial position that we're in right now, and it seems every year we are sort of jumping to and from trying to come up with an infusion of money here, an infusion of money there to deal with some of the underlying concerns and problems that the MTA is facing. And Pat, I just wanted to hear your general thoughts on that.
So Speaker, first, I didn't expect Nicole Gelinas to get so much airtime at a city council hearing, but I know she'll be grateful. I would make the following point. The comments that you and the chairman made in your opening remarks about issues with the MTA in the past and inefficiencies and delayed construction projects and other things, I think have been features of the past, to be sure. The new team here, new focus. The message from the legislature, and I think this was appropriate, was in passing central business district tolling and the other revenues, which I recognize are borne by New York City residents in large part and commuters into New York City. The message in requiring transformation, in requiring design build, was for the MTA to get its house in order before it came asking for additional operating aid. We've taken that message to heart, we've internalized it, and we're acting on it. The requirement in the legislation that a transformation plan be put together, be approved by the board, that a chief transformation officer be hired, those things have been now done and are critical steps in transforming the MTA, reducing the cost basis, which is not going to be easy, but Bob Foran and his team, working with the agency presidents, have taken a couple of $2 billion of expense out, annual recurring. That's an extraordinary achievement. And we've got more to do to get our house in order before we go, as you noted, asking for additional revenues or support from any taxpayer.
Do you plan on going to Albany this year before the statutory budget deadline of April 1st for the state budget to ask for additional funds for operating the MTA?
Speaker, I think we'll do the same thing in Albany, which we're doing here today, which is to report honestly on progress, to report honestly on challenges, and where we are in the transformation process, which I think is the single most important initiative at the MTA now in terms of reforming the agency and reducing costs.
And I just want to say, I don't agree with the Manhattan Institute on a lot of things, but I do think that Nicole Gelinas is a very smart scholar and someone who has been forward-thinking and looking at transportation and the financial difficulties that the state has faced, the city has faced, the MTA has faced, and I think she's actually been a sort of a siren call ahead of time and looking at areas where the public hasn't had enough sunlight to look at those things.
Speaker, I too hold her in high regard. She's terrific.
We both hold her in high regard. If you could just get back to the why 500 cops, and can you share the data and analysis that was done to come up with that number?
Sure. First, principle, we have an obligation to provide a safe and secure environment in the subways, on buses, Metro North, and Long Island Railroad. I'm not going to apologize for that. The expenditure came out in our 4-year capital plan as $250 million or a number like that. The annual expense is a substantial expense, but it's about $50 million. There was consultation with the leadership of the MTA police, who obviously do staffing things. I'll note that of the 500, about 80 of those positions are vacancies, attrition, or unfilled positions. We've got a police force, as many police forces do, with officers who've reached 20, 25, 30 years of service. And there is statistical data that suggests when a police class reaches that level of seniority, X% will retire in the ordinary course of business because of the provisions of police pensions. So there was a whole planning exercise, and that work goes on all the time. The officers that are being hired, that the first waves are about to join the MTA police force, will police New York City Transit, buses, Metro North, and Long Island Railroad. The agencies of, all of the agencies of the MTA. And frankly, we're very focused in, especially given, for instance, the transit workers who were with us this morning, the significant increase in attacks on transit workers who have come to our board meetings and talked about increases in physical assaults and increases in sexual assaults. Very focused on protecting and providing a safe and secure environment for customers and employees alike.
I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to ask, given the uptick of assaults that we've seen on transit workers, is there a specific part of the plan for these officers that deals with that, particularly attacks on buses, given what we've seen?
So there is, we are in conversations with the TWU on the safety issues. I've spoken with the senior leadership of the TWU in the last week on these issues, on the Class D felony legislation, which is already on the books in Albany, and the cries of the transit workers and their leadership, given the increase in assaults on transit workers and sexual assaults, is one that we're taking as a first order priority.
Is there a plan on how the officers will be deployed? How many will protect workers versus how many will monitor fare evasion?
That plan is being developed. To be honest, I'm not going to get into details on it because I think it would be inappropriate to do that in a public setting. I will say that the officers will be deployed across all MTA agencies.
And are they getting special training on the outreach that's being done for the vulnerable, homeless New Yorkers that are struggling, that so many New Yorkers see on subway platforms and in subway cars? Are they receiving specialized training?
Yes, sir. All of the officers in the first waves have gone through the NYPD Police Academy and have gotten the same training that an NYPD recruit and new officer would get.
So is it not 500 new cops? Is it 500 new cops?
It's 500 hires, yes, sir.
So, I would love for you to share with us the data and analysis that was done to reach that number, on how the MTA figured that out, so we can understand, given that it's a significant expense to the operating budget and riders want to focus on improving service. That's where I think money should be directed. I was someone that wasn't supportive of hiring this, given that we have almost over 2,500 NYPD officers that are currently doing this work. And I think what you see, I don't know if you are monitoring Twitter, but what I see on Twitter, as it relates to everyday New Yorkers, not advocates, just random people who are riding the subway, who will see 4, 5, 6, 7 police officers standing outside the turnstiles, watching to see if people are going to evade the fare. It doesn't seem that the current officers are being deployed in a way to actually deal with assaults against transit workers or deal with other major felonies that are happening across the system. Instead, what I think New Yorkers see are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cops standing at the turnstiles, and they say, is this what we should be spending money on?
Look, I think that the NYPD, which is an incredible police force, and the MTA Police Department, which is an incredible transportation police force, do extraordinary work in a very demanding and challenging environment. I will tell you the 500 hires that will be put in place by the end of 2020. 80, as I mentioned, are attrition, unfilled positions, and vacancies. Providing a safe and secure environment for the subways, buses, Metro North, and Long Island Railroad is not, in my mind, that I know you weren't suggesting this, Speaker. It's not an option. It's not an add-on. It's not a luxury. It's a fundamental part of providing transit service. I think that given the increase in certain levels of crimes, including attacks on transit workers, but also in assaults generally and in misdemeanor arrests, that this was an appropriate investment. and it will further our goal of providing a safe and secure environment at every agency.
So how much of this had to do with fare evasion versus the issues that you just outlined?
Fair evasion, quality of life, increases in crime. These officers, like all officers, are going to do general policing. How they're deployed will be decisions made by the police leadership at the time. And I'm not going to comment on that. And it will, as it does in the NYPD, those deployments will change depending on the order of the day or the circumstances of the time.
Now, I really question if putting more law enforcement in the subways is really the best option, but just on fare evasion specifically, is the MTA looking at what other cities are doing to deal with fare evasion? The Dutch are focusing on better gate design when people are entering the transit system, getting people to pay, and avoiding violent interactions that they may have with people that are trying to crack down on fare evasion. In one city that's outlined in this great article by City Lab, which you all should look at if you haven't read, about what cities across Europe are doing to deal with fare evasion, from the UK to Berlin to all over the Netherlands. In one city, part of your fine actually gets your card loaded with rides. So you pay the fine, and the fine doesn't go to the MTA or to the police. It actually goes toward giving you a card that actually has, I think in this place in Netherlands, this city of 200,000 people, it helps fund 10 rides on a subway card for you to actually encourage you to become a paying customer. We, of course, invested in Fair Fares. We are glad to partner with you on that. To me, it just seems like overkill and that there are better ways to get at this. I just want to hear what the MTA's long-term vision is on dealing with fare evasion is.
Yeah. Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Andy, I'm glad that your resignation letter was not accepted and that you're sitting here today.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Speaker, thank you. Fare evasion is not unique to the MTA. It's a challenge certainly on everywhere I've ever worked in rail corp in Australia, in the Tube at the TTC. It's a global phenomenon, and you raised some good examples there of different ways in which different agencies have tackled it. We can't and we shouldn't just ignore it. And what we should be saying to people is, if you can't afford the fare, not paying for the fare isn't the option, but there is now a laudable, thanks to your leadership, a laudable alternative, namely the Fair Fares initiative. And certainly we don't want to arrest people. We don't want to see people get into trouble. We just want them to pay their fare. Why? Because A, that's fair, F-A-I-R, on other people that do pay, and B, it means it's not revenue foregone that can be put into improving service, which is what we all want. In terms of the actual deployment of officers, that has to be equitable. We are looking at ways to design out the vulnerability, though, the Achilles heel, if you like, of our system. And we do have, and I can't say I've seen it anywhere else, a particular weakness in our station design, and that is the secondary gate that is a feature at all of our subway stations. It's there for a reason. It's there to allow quick egress off platforms as part of the fire code. But of course, when people are coming out, people can go in. So one thing I'm very familiar with, and I've got my team having a look at the moment, is wide gates that still enable you to go into the station by using your smart card, and of course we're getting a smart card, a wide gate that would not only mean that you could then enter through paddles and you can't come out the other way, but that you would be able to go through that where you're in a wheelchair, if you had a stroller, for example, or if you had a load of luggage. So that's something that progressively I think we need to do. I would like to see us move to a proof of payment system whereby as long as you have proof of payment throughout your journey, then that's fine. So again, it's taking the emphasis off arresting people, but it is saying that if in the future one of our inspectors boards a bus and we ask you for proof of payment, and that can easily be achieved with a smart card, we will expect you to A, have paid in the first place, and B, to have paid the right amount. So I think one of the advantages of having worked elsewhere is I am familiar with a lot of these solutions. We are actively looking at them. The one with the loaded card is interesting. We could take a look at that. I do, though, counsel against things like, and I know you didn't suggest this, in the past I've worked places where people have said, you should just have the inspectors, they shouldn't arrest people, they should just sell you a ticket there and then. I disagree with that, because where's the deterrent? You will still chance it because you know that there's no downside to being caught. All that happens is if you get caught, say 1 in 10 times, you have to pay. So there is a lot of thought going into this. We don't don't want to arrest people, but we can't just let $260 million or more walk out of the door.
I understand we don't want to lose that revenue, but I also have a concern about over-policing and criminalizing poverty for New Yorkers. And I would love for the MTA to come back at some point and give sort of a broader vision on other tools to look at on fare evasion for the long term for the MTA, given that it's a persistent problem in New York City and in other municipalities around the world, as you mentioned, Andy, taking a look at what other cities have done successfully in eliminating the huge number in fare evasion, but also not having the primary tool be in interaction with law enforcement and figuring out, maybe through a pilot program or other ways, what we can do. Pat, are you open to looking, maybe you already are, looking at these things that the MTA could be doing?
Yeah, Speaker, the one thing of course we're open. The one thing I would add to Andy's comments, which I think were comprehensive, is on the funding side. DA Vance from the New York County DA's Asset Forfeiture Fund allocated $40 million to exploring these two new technologies, some of the technologies that Andy described, and to help defray the cost of policing. But we're open to exploring all of these things, and as Andy just showed, he's on top of the technology around the country and around the world.
And then lastly, just on this police question, are we putting a proportional number of officers on Long Island Railroad or Metro North trains, or is it just focused on New York City Transit?
Every agency, Speaker.
Every agency.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Speaker, may I just add one other comment?
Please.
I think is pertinent. I think, again, you just speaking from experience, it seems to me that what you really need to do with any fare evasion problem is you will always have, and it's again not unique to New York, you see it elsewhere, there will be a percentage of people who are determined not to pay the fare, whether that's because they don't agree that they should have to pay a fare, they're mad at the transit system or whatever. They are people are sort of hardcore, they absolutely set out not to pay the fare. At the other end of the spectrum, you've got the vast majority of decent, honest people who just it would be anathema to them not to pay, to evade the fare. So you've got two ends of the spectrum there: people that set out not to pay, and people for whom that's never an option. In the middle, you've got what I call chancers, and to me, that's the big opportunity here. Quite often, they're people who can pay the fare, but who on a particular day, for whatever reason, take a chance. So an effective strategy has three main elements. Number one, for those people who just can't afford the fare, there should be a lower fare option. And thanks to your leadership and that of City Council, we now have that. Tick. Check. Good. That's great. Number two, you should have a very high likelihood, or a pretty high likelihood, and typically the accepted practice is perhaps one journey in three, but you should have a high likelihood that at some point on your journey you will have your ticket inspected, that we will check that you have actually paid. And number three, if you are found not to have paid or not to have paid the correct amount, the penalty should be pretty high. And that's how you deal with what I call the chances, because if you really think the chances are you're probably going to get checked, you can afford it, and the penalty, though, is pretty high, then you will deter those chances. And that's, in my professional opinion, how you deal with this in an equitable manner.
Chancers is British English, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Andy. Okay, I'm going to try to finish up here so I can turn it over to the chair. I'm going to try to rifle through, get through some things very quickly. Currently, the 2015 to 2019 capital plan calls for $8.6 billion in state funding and $2.7 billion in city funding. We're at the tail end of it here, the tail end of the current capital plan that we're in. So of the state's $8.6 billion, can you tell us how much money the MTA has received from the state and how much you've spent out of that $8.6 billion?
Of that money, we have committed against, meaning let contracts on almost $5 billion of that.
How much have you received?
We've received and spent about $800 million on that.
No. Out of the $8.6 billion, how much has the MTA received from the state into the MTA's coffers out of that $8.6 billion?
That's the number I just gave you, sir.
You've received $5 billion.
No, we've committed. Just one second.
I don't understand the difference between committed and received.
Hello!
Yeah, committed, we can't enter into a contract unless we have a source of funding identified.
Just explain this to me. When you get money from the state or from the city, either one, and the city says, we're giving you $2.7 billion. I expect the city's transferring $2.7 billion to the MTA so that you all can use and spend that money. Out of the $8.6 billion that the state said they were giving you or gave you or appropriated to you in the current capital plan, how much of that $8.6 million has been transferred into the MTA's fund to be able to spend the money?
We have received, again, about $800 million that we have spent.
Where is the other $7.8 billion?
It's yet to come.
Mr.
Speaker, if you recall, in the last capital program, the money to come from the city and the money to come from the state was to be received at the back end of the capital program.
But we're at the back end.
Yes, and that's where the money is starting to come in.
So
we expect to receive all of the state's money within the next couple of years, and we expect to receive the city's money. Sir, the city's money is yet to come in as well.
The city should give you the money,
Yep.
and the state should give you the money, and they should give it to you in the current capital plan that it's in. This capital plan's ending in 30 days or something.
No. The way the capital program works is we commit money. Okay.
Yes.
We have 5-year periods. The spending typically takes place over an 8 or 9-year period. And I have to point out on this capital program, we started 18 months late. So really, we're 2/3 of the way through a capital program. So we started 18 months late in funding. Yeah, because the CPRP program was not approved.
Mr. Ferran, I am glad you're here today because you're explaining this in a way that I understand, but the average New Yorker who wants to understand how the MTA works, their head would spin to understand the difference between committed, received, this capital plan, that capital plan, it rolls into this, the CPR. I mean, there has to be a better way to explain this and do this for the public, especially when we're throwing around huge numbers of $8.6 billion and $2.7 billion. And when the city and state makes that commitment, as they should, as I'm glad they did, that money needs to be given to the MTA in a timely manner so that Jano, when he is bundling projects to get the projects done on time and in an expedited manner and to bring costs down, that he actually has that money to play with and is not waiting for it on the back end.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree. And that's why on this upcoming capital program, the 20 to 24 capital program, we're asking the city and we're asking the state for $3 billion each to come in and provide the funding. That's our ask.
Yeah, but Mr. Ferran, I'm glad you brought that up. Last time the state gave you $8.6 billion, right? In the last capital plan.
They committed.
The current capital plan.
Yes.
Committed 8.6.
Yes.
The city committed 2.7.
Yes.
Now you're coming to us, to the city, and saying you want $3 billion from us, so $300 million more. I mean, I have to understand more before I say we should do that, but fine, that makes sense. $2.7 billion to $3 billion. The state's going from $8.6 billion to $3 billion. Why?
Because between the state and the city and the legislature's enactment, we have. Sorry, what? Okay. We have central business district tolling, we have the internet tax, and we have the mansion tax, totaling $25 billion that we're receiving. The extra $6 billion dedicated for accessibility being asked of the city and of the state is part of that.
But that money, for that $25 billion is what the total amount is when you bond the central businesses are tolling money. That is coming from New Yorkers. That's coming basically from New York City streets. So it's coming from New York. It's not coming from the state legislature or sort of a general state legislative fund or the state's budget.
So, Speaker, can I make 2 points? One is, with respect, in the 2015 to 2019 capital plan, the current one, which started 18 months late, as Bob noted, because of the delay in the approval by the Capital Program Review Board. We expect, and it's been our experience, that every dollar that the state of New York and the city of New York committed to the capital plan is available, appropriated, authorized, and when we ask for it to be committed or spent, it will be so. And that has been our experience so far. With respect to the city of New York and state of New York's commitment to capital plans in the past, if we start with the 2015 plan and the 2020 plan, the city of New York will have committed about $6 billion in total, and the state of New York will have committed about 12 in total. If you look at all the approved capital programs going back to 1982 when Mr. Ravitch was the chair of the MTA, and excluding the 2020 to 24 plan, the city of New York has provided about $13.2 billion in capital to all those capital plans, and the state of New York has provided 34.9.
And I'd also need to point out, all of the money coming from the state has been appropriated. It's fully appropriated. And that's why we are able to let contracts against it, and that's why we're starting to spend money against those contracts. So we feel very comfortable that we're going to receive the money that the state has promised in the 15 to 19 capital program, just as we feel comfortable that we're going to receive the money that the city has committed. And we are now working with the city to identify projects that they will fund. But for the extraordinary commitments that were made in the 15 to 19 capital program, where we received significantly more additional funds, the agreement was that those monies would come in at the end of the capital program, and the monies are starting to flow, and we do appreciate it, and we are spending against it, and I'm confident it's going to come in.
So why should the city make its capital funding available earlier in the plan than the states?
Good question.
Well, not earlier than the states.
No, it's coming in at the same time on the second capital program. And what the ask is of both the city and the state is this time we'll first spend the money against the central business tolling district revenue that's been identified. We'll spend the money that's coming in from the sales tax, and we'll spend the money that's coming in from the mansion tax. Once those monies are committed against and we're spending those dollars, that's when we're going to ask the city and the state to provide the funding, $6 billion as requested. Then the MTA will sell $9.7 billion worth of additional debt, but it will do it at the end of the capital program, just as this time we did it on the front end of the capital program. And the reason we're making that request is we're just trying to push as far off as possible anything that would have pressure on the fare box.
So why should the city give the MTA the additional money when you haven't finished your current plan?
Because
Good
we're starting to
question.
lean against the next plan.
So Speaker, I think there are two answers to that question, and then I'll turn it over to Jano. Answer one is the $3 billion from the state and the $3 billion from the city of New York are dedicated to accessibility investments with respect to the city's investment entirely to accessibility investments in the subways. The second point is the point that Bob just made. Doing this, and this is consistent with the theme that in your opening remarks about pressure on the operating budget, delaying the MTA piece, the $9 billion that Bob just described, will reduce the operating the pressure on the operating budget from increased debt service. We will delay it and therefore reduce it. But the programmatic point is that the $3 billion from the state and the $3 billion from the city will be dedicated to accessibility.
Okay, I have my final question. The new capital plan includes $10 billion in funding from new revenue sources, as you mentioned, Mr. Ferran, including a progressive tax on the transfer of high-end real estate and the elimination of the internet tax advantage. This funding represents 18% of the total funding of the capital plan that we're discussing today, the next capital plan. Could you tell us how much revenue you expect to get from each of these new sources and how you arrived at these estimates?
Those are based upon budget, New York State Division of Budget numbers. I think it's 320 from one source on an annual basis and about $370 million a year on an annual basis. So in total, about $690 million.
Pat, I'm just going to hopefully throw you a little T-ball question here. Why should New Yorkers feel good about the current state of where things are at the MTA? I mean, you've said a bunch of times, and again, you and I have a very good relationship, and I respect you tremendously, as well as Jano and Andy, and now Bob Ferran, given that he's here today. But you've said we brought on a new team, so it sort of sounds like we have a new team, trust us. But given all of the financial issues, given the questions around the financial plan, given the lack of transparency, what would you say to the public on why they should feel confident about the MTA's direction, about the proposed capital plan, even with, as Mr. Ferrand said, we're in a dire financial situation as it relates to the MTA, an overarching answer to why the public should feel confident about the MTA right now?
So, Speaker, rather than talking about aspirations or what we're going to do or what we might do in 2020 or 21, I want to talk about what we're doing now. So I mentioned in my opening remarks, the L train is on time and on budget, thanks to work by Jano and his team and Andy Byford and his team. The second track, the Long Island Railroad project, is on time and on budget. The third track was delivered a year early.
The second track was delivered.
The second track was delivered a year early, forgive me. Omni, the new fare payment system, is being rolled out. It's on budget. We report that to CPOC and the board and the public regularly. It's on time, it's on budget. Central Business District tolling infrastructure we plan to bring to the board this month in November. We actually brought it in October, a month early. The contract with the selected vendor in a competitive RFP was signed early. The design, we gave the contractor the instructions notice to proceed on the design. That is proceeding. Each of these are incredibly important projects we're working on now, and L-Train, second track, third track, Omni, Central Business District tolling are examples of where the MTA is not performing in the way that you and other important elected officials have appropriately criticized. We've got a lot more work to do. We've got a huge transformation to go through. We've got a lot of expense cuts to make. But these are examples on major projects that we're either working on now or in the time that this new team has been in place are on time and on budget.
What do you think about municipal control of the subways and buses, Pat?
So, Speaker, it's a very complicated issue. I would note the following. First, I think your proposal was interesting and provocative. I think the points I would make would be the following. One question would be regional taxes like the payroll mobility taxes and other things which are fundamental components of the MTA's financial structure today are a byproduct of the fact that the MTA is a state agency. So figuring out a way to replace those, I think, would be unbelievably challenging. Second is, obviously, most transportation policy in the state of New York is set by the state legislature. And then third, long before any of our times, the subways and buses were run by the city of New York.
Until Governor Rockefeller took it away from Mayor Lindsay.
In 1969, correctly. But the circumstances leading to the takeover was, for instance, a long period of time where the subway fare was not increased. That may have been an equitable thing to do, but obviously had a significant impact on the financial condition of New York City Transit at the time, and I would suggest had a significant impact on the ridership experience. I think it's a very complicated issue that'll be decided at levels significantly above my pay grade by elected officials in Albany and here at the City Council. For now, we are proceeding with the assumption that the MTA's current structure and authorizing legislation will continue, and we're pushing forward with improving service, improving customer service, and transformation.
So I'll finish with, I assume, Pat, you're glad that Andy Byford is still here.
Amen.
I don't want to make him uncomfortable, but I assume you're glad he's still here.
Amen. I look forward to working with him.
So how did you convince him to retract that resignation letter that none of us have been able to see to understand why he wanted to resign?
So Speaker, in my mind, use a British phrase, I think that's chalk and cheese, and I think that's long past us.
Well, I want to see Andy to be empowered. I think he brought a tremendous amount of confidence from the riding public to the MTA. He and I did not discuss this. He's blushing and looking away as I say this because I think that's the type of person that he is. But I think it was very dispiriting and upsetting for New Yorkers to see that potentially he was leaving. And I'm glad, Pat, with your leadership, you were able to convince him to stay. I'm sad that Ronnie is leaving. I'm happy for her in retirement, but she's been a great person to work with and has a great career in serving New Yorkers. And I want Andy Byford to stay, to be empowered, to not have New York City Transit be weakened in this transformation plan. The City Council, I think I could speak for the vast majority of us, has tremendous confidence in his leadership, in his vision, in his formulating the Fast Forward plan. I want to give a shout out to Sarah Meyer, who's done a tremendous job in customer service at the MTA under Andy, and I just want to leave you with that today, and I hope you understand the gravity of that comment that I give, because I think literally millions of New Yorkers are watching and are grateful for Andy Byford's service and leadership and vision at New York City Transit.
So, Speaker, I look forward to working with Andy and Sarah Meyer and their colleagues for a long period of time. I think the success of the subway action plan, thanks to funding from the state and the city, the dramatic increase in on-time performance, and the increase in ridership speak for themselves.
Pat, thank you for being here. Jano, Andy, Bob, and I really appreciate this long, extended back and forth today. I look forward to following up with specific questions to Jano on the projects, the cost overruns, the bundling, the sequencing, the phasing, all of that to understand what's going to happen in the future. And with that, I turn it over to Chair Rodriguez. I apologize for taking so much time, but Pat told me he's available to be here until about 11 o'clock tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Speaker. We look forward to coming back.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it. Council Speaker Corey Johnson making his remarks to Patrick Joseph Foy, Bob Foran, Jano Lieber, and Ali Byford. We still haven't got the answer why Ali Byford wanted to resign. What happened with that? And a couple of points that Corey Johnson I could agree with is demanding transparency. How much is the city going to commit? No, let's say if the city commits $3 million or $3 billion, and what the MTA is going to spend that money on, like, thank you for joining me, Brian. And what the agency is going to spend that money. So we're gonna do a little bit of fast forward because we don't wanna.
Speaker. And before asking a question, I'm going to say que en el día de hoy la audiencia que estamos sosteniendo es muy importante para nosotros discutir lo que tiene que ver con el presente y el futuro de la transportación de Nueva York, un sistema que le ha fallado muchas veces en el pasado.
There you have Yanis Rodriguez speaking in Spanish.
De escasos recursos económicos, como son lugares de Washington Heights, del sur del Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, en Staten Island. Y que nosotros esperamos que la MTA en el día de hoy discuta con nosotros un mejor plan de cómo vamos a hacer la transportación algo asequible para todos los neoyorquinos. I believe that having Senator leaders Theo Cousin and Cal Hastings make a big difference to get the criminal justice reform and the new housing law that we pass, because they come from places that represent the underserved community. I do have issue when you say we are the leadership of the MTA and there's no diversity there. I feel that it makes a difference and we should address it. Most of the individuals that you're mentioning doesn't reflect the New York City that we have in 2019, which is 29% Latino, 27% Afro-American, 15% Asian. And, you know, the new leadership of our society we have to be very careful because there's a new wave of youth, people who are not yet the organizing who took Socari Park. That movement didn't die at the park. That movement is spreading through the whole society. And they will continue getting into the subway, demanding free transportation. They will continue getting into the subway, say, we don't need to have any police officer using their power. And they will be in thousand. And then we question why and how do we react. And I feel that we, all of us who are in position of power, inherit a society that we don't, we are.
Okay, we're gonna do a little fast forward because it's getting pretty late. It's 1:17. We're gonna do a little fast forward. But of course, you have the. Okay, you're saying, Brian, you're saying Lefferts Boulevard on the A? Or you're saying Lefferts Boulevard Air Train Station? Be specific. Okay, we're gonna do a little fast forward. Okay.
From DC.
But as a reminder to our viewers that will watch this in replay, if you want to watch the entire hearing, the link is posted on the description below.
Is to do good for his businesses. And many of those businesses are in New York City, and his partners too. Have you tried to work with the public-private sector to see if from DC there's a commitment to get the dollar to expand it to the South Bronx?
I don't know that, there's an option for future phases to continue to the South Bronx. But what I would say to you, Chairman, is one, we have worked closely with the business community, especially the East Harlem Chamber of Commerce and other East Harlem businesses to support.
Okay, let's keep moving forward.
This plan will.
Councilmember, sorry.
Okay. I'll respect the chair.
Ask the next questions and we move to the next one.
I mean, but you took a sizable amount of time, so we could, okay.
Okay. Councilmember Chacon, followed by Councilmember Levin.
Okay, thank you. Hi, gentlemen. Because I only have 3 minutes, I'm going to ask my questions, and I invite you to pick up your pens if you want to.
Okay, let's.
They know each other at the leadership level. There are protocols in place.
Okay.
Epic fail.
And did was NYPD asked?
Consistent with what other large cities around the United States have done with their e-hail on-demand program.
So I just wanted to hear what's your plan for that. Councilmember Miller could not be here today, but he wanted me to raise the question around the Jamaica bus depot and where we are at with that. And then the last thing I'll ask about is where you at in terms of the bus network on automated bus lane enforcement on ABLE. So if you could just answer those 3 questions, where you at on
I mean, I guess they're part of.
3 hours. 3 hours.
The woman in the blue. But I also know again that if there's a situation of someone who is dealing with severe mental health issue, and that person is in a situation in a station, if a unit that has not been trained on how to respond and interact are not the first responding, it can create a situation where even though the level of training that the police officer can have, probably he or she cannot handle that situation. And that's what we like to prevent. We don't want to be in a press conference because someone was killed or someone was made abused by the force of someone on the men and women. We want to be sure that we support you, but from our end, we're having a lot of concern about what is the interaction between those individuals. Why we don't think about bringing back some of the staff in the station from the MTA so that we add more besides those individuals that we have, but we lost a lot because we cut a lot. We closed a lot of talking booth 15 years ago. And with that process, we also lost a lot of physical presence of the MTA in some stations. So, I hope again that we can look at that situation. I don't think it's an easy one. It's not a black and white situation. Minor crimes in the train station are real. The presence of people who doesn't have a place where to live in the station is real. How do we handle it? That's key. And I signed together with my colleague here. We don't want to be in a situation where, an abuse of power or using those situations to send someone to the prison is the solution to the numbers of people that can commit any minor crimes. But again, I hope again that we can partner advocating to provide free transportation. When we supported the congestion price, we also ask that some of those monies should be used. We know the $1 billion for the big plan of the MTA, but also we look about the possibility on how some of those money could be used for other matter important of transportation. So I don't want to put you in the spot to say, oh, can you agree with us that we can use some of those money to provide free transportation? But at least I would like to put it in your thought that when you think about here the city can provide the funding, that also the MTA should be created on how we can advocate together to provide free transportation to those individuals.
So, Chairman, you understand, of course, that the congestion, the central business district tolling and the other revenue sources by law can only be used for capital. But as I said before, we fully support Phase 1 of Fair Fares and its expansion on a city
networks and use industry averages as benchmarks to assess its own.
Okay, we're not gonna listen to Colin Wright. Hashtag 9to5 lifestyles. But yes, the interesting moment is among us. And we have PCAC Executive Director Lisa Daglian. And we have sitting right there at the corner William Stanford Jr., aka Mr. X. What Mr. X will say? Let's wait for it. And the time is 1:24 in the morning.
This is getting ridiculous with Patricia dancing like a rockhead. Okay, he stated in his budget he wants 500 more cops. Why? To protect his own interests. He's not providing for our safety, he's providing for his safety. Okay, if you don't already know Danny, which is short for Dennis, the MTA Police Department has cops sitting at 2 Broadway Avenue, 24 cops watching us in there, standing there doing nothing, standing a bunch of zombies. Okay, he can use them. At least 2 of them are assigned to protect him. But apparently, he forgot that part. Okay, nobody's getting through to him. You're not getting through to him. I'm not getting through. TW Local 100 isn't getting through to him. Okay, at a recent board meeting, he cut me off because he felt what my comments by his predecessor were disgusting, and he sent them after me. He has his budget. I have mine. I'm happy to share with that. I didn't get a chance to prepare it. But no, we don't need 500 more cops. We don't need more consultants, which I discovered recently. He hired more consultants than employees. So as I said it before, the MTA doesn't stand for Metropolitan Transit Authority. It stands for money thrown away. And who we have is ED? Patricia Ford, who looks like Bubba Ray Dudley and Dusty Rhodes with our Sapphire. It's time for him to go. He joined MTA. He replaced Ronnie Hagum, who was a joke, also a joke, as MTA head. And what has he done? Nothing but make childish excuses. And this is what he did here today. He enjoys that. It's a thrill for him. It's like the thrill of Michael Jackson. It's time for him to go.
Oh God.
Good afternoon. Thank you,
Wow.
Councilman Rodriguez.
To keep saying over and over again. We appreciate, as we know you do, Andy Byford's leadership and the steps he's already taken to improve the city's transit network, as evidenced by the increases in on-time performance and ridership. Funding and implementing this capital plan will really allow the aspirations of Fast Forward, Long Island Railroad Forward, Metro North Way Ahead to become reality. The infusion of congestion pricing is a game changer and will be an integral part of financing the capital plan. However, the bulk of that money won't come through until 2021, until mid-21 to 22. So it's critical that the early funding sources be identified and come through in a timely manner. And that's why our really big ask is for that the city provide its $3 billion as has been laid out, and that the state provide their $3 billion as well early, so that the accessibility projects can really get moving. The MTA has said clearly that it wants to deliver projects better, faster, and more cost effectively, and we look forward to the standardization of its new approach to doing business. We're already seeing a number of positive changes and new approaches, including the use of design build, bundling projects, reducing contract sign-off turnaround time, speeding up contractor payments, and using community input to determine contractor incentive payments. These are the hallmarks of effective and efficient taxpayer dollars. Approving, funding, and getting the capital plan going will finally help bring about the 21st century transit network riders in our 21st century city and region need. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jose Hernandez. I'm the New York City Advocacy Coordinator for United Spine Association, and I am the Civic Engagement Commissioner appointed by
Born or platform born, you'd have.
Okay, now
So with
let's.
that,
Okay, now we're gonna do a small analysis regarding this hearing. Okay, you're saying Brian Lefferts Boulevard on the A. Let me see what I could do. Because today I was in New Jersey, resolving some things, and did an unannounced station tour. That video is already on my YouTube channel. But now my point of view. Uh, First and foremost, honestly, Patrick Joseph Foy, went to the city council not providing to the darling of Chelsea, Corey Johnson, the answers that he wanted. And asking for more money, but not giving a concrete answer and what that money is going to be used. And using the complicated term of the Central Business District tolling. Other people say it as congestion pricing. That's the concept behind the Central Business District toll. It's called a congestion price. That starting in a few years from now, New York City taxpayers who drive south of 61st Street will have to pay a toll. How it will be, we don't know. Could our subway fare be the highest in the nation? Uh, in terms of subway, it is. Because we are the highest in the Northeast. If we compare it to Boston, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C., even Baltimore. Because paying $275 is no joke. Paying $127 in a being deducted from my paycheck is no joke. But I do it because I don't commit fare evasion. Although I know people that do that, but people won't see me do it. But let's see what's gonna happen in the December football committee meetings. That once again, my apologies. We are going to invite everybody to attend. And you have Monday, December 16th at 10 a.m. If you want to raise concern, anything regarding DRC transit or MTA bus, that's your opportunity. If your concern is about LIRR or Metro North, your opportunity is that on that same day by 8:30 in the morning. If your concern is bridges and tunnels, you have the opportunity that same day, Monday, December 16th at 1 p.m. If your concern is finance, you have the opportunity at 1:30 in the afternoon that same day. If your concern is about capital construction, you have opportunity at 2:30 that same day. Or you have the opportunity to address in the full board on Wednesday, December 18th at 10 a.m. You are okay. You could raise your opportunity, your concerns there also. So with that said, we want to thank everybody that joined us during the live stream. There's more to come, and we'll see you guys later on.